experience for the kids. The challenges that we ran into um, is not necessarily all the teams we played had the same uh, rules in place. There was a couple times my coaches had to kind of remind their coaches, um, hey, your kids should have masks on, and our kids recognized it and they kept socially distanced and stuff like that. The only problem that we ran into, and I plan to address when we sort of meet as a league, or well, what happened in the middle school is the two leagues sort of combined, and we just played games that way. So we'll probably be meeting again in the next month. Um, and we just ran into problems with the fact that parents weren't allowed to go to games, and I was sending teams away with one coach. So we did have an incident down in Newport where a kid had to be medically removed from the game, um, and we had no parents there and one coach. So it all works out well. We worked well as a team to get the job done, but that was definitely our biggest issue going into the season, and we'll hope to address it before winter season. Mike?
Okay, thanks, Steve. I'll talk about our challenges first, and I always like to end on positives. So, the challenges were many. I think obviously the physical spacing, during drills when we first started out. So when we went to that phase 1 to phase 2, and then into phase 3, and we started adding some equipment, I think our coaches struggled at first with trying to devise drills that were a little bit different and unique in order to keep that spacing. Especially, like I said, once the equipment was added, I think that created more of an issue for them. During the games, spacing during the drink breaks, halftime was a tough one at first to remember to tell the kids to make sure that they put their masks on and that we have the masks on during the entire halftime. After practice, while leaving, we needed constant reminders. I think the kids did a much better job coming in than they did leaving. So that was something that was almost a daily thing. Not having locker rooms was an issue for us. Especially on game days, just allowing those kids to have enough time to get changed. And the practice days weren't as much of an issue, but on game days when we had early releases and things like that, it created a little bit of an issue that we weren't used to. And when I say not having locker rooms, it's not that we didn't allow them to go in and change, but they're just used to having a locker. They're used to having more time to be able to go in and get themselves situated before leaving for a game. And this year was rushed. Spacing on the bus was tricky with equipment. I think we did a really good job. The coaches did a good job with separating their teams so that we could fit both teams on. I appreciate the accommodations that you, Meredith, allowed us to make in terms of those pods. That helped us increase the number so that we could get those kids on the bus and not rely on kids driving, which I know was a big concern for us early on. The delicate balance of trying to be proactive rather than reactive. The example that I'll give you is that the very first opportunity that we had to travel in the season was our cross country team. And for the past multiple decades, at least since I've been here, and I know it was a tradition before we got here, was that when the kids turn the corner to come into the parking lot, they break out into school song. Regardless of outcome, doesn't matter whether we win or lose, but it's something that they love to do and they take pride in it. And we just didn't catch that, So once we did, obviously we made some adjustments, but just trying to think of all of the scenarios that we had to be proactive with was a big challenge. And if we didn't think of it, we became reactive and we made some adjustments. And I thought we did a fairly good job with that. I think from the players, some of the feedback from the players was not being able to support their classmates at games. Not being able to go to the games was a big issue for them. We're a small school and they really like to support one another. And not even being able to to leave their practice. A tradition that we have is that during a game, all of the teams that are practicing stop their practice and they come over to the game and they do a couple of chants or cheers just to show their support, and then they head right back. And because of that 100-person capacity, we never were allowed to do that. So doesn't seem to, might not be a big deal to adults, but for them it really is. It's all about that. It's all about that support and that pride. Scheduling the contest to ensure that we stayed under that 100 capacity was an issue. Thankfully, we had a great fall weather-wise, so we didn't have many cancellations, so that really helped. Another one from the kids were no families at the banquets at the end, especially for our seniors. So that made a difference for them. And then the last one for the challenges were the playoffs. No playoffs, and obviously the latest one with the cross country state champions chips being canceled yesterday. So I will say one of the unique things was that there was only 3 state championships allotted this fall total in the state of Maine, and Orono, our golf team, was fortunate enough to have one of those 3. So congratulations again to them. Some of the positives were, obviously, I go back to July, the development of the Northern Light link, that phone link for our kids to be able to walk on campus and immediately show that to our trainer or their coaches was saved tremendous amount of time and repetitive questioning and things like that. There were a few times where kids would forget that or forget their phone, and our trainer or myself or the coaches would ask those questions. But that Northern Light link was key, and it actually, that went out to the whole state of Maine once we had let other ADs know about that. The state of Maine took JP's work and applied it to all the other programs, the summer programs across. So that was a plus. I think the communication, this is coming from the coaches, communication during the summer, being able to start up in July was a real positive for us to kind of learn the protocols and get the kids back together. But I think the transition between the summer and the regular season was so much smoother for us because we had started back in June. So, and then really got going in July with the summer conditioning program. Being able to meet with the coaches prior to starting the guidelines, I think was a plus. It really allowed JP and Amy and I to really set the tone in terms of what would the expectations, be flexible, things were going to change, they were going to be fluid, and be able to transition in with the kids that way. Having an athletic trainer with me on site every night from July 6th throughout the season, from start to finish, I thought was a tremendous comforting piece for the kids and the coaches. We just felt, Amy and I felt that having us there at every practice from start to finish, if anything were to happen to an athlete, they got sick, that we could take care of them in the isolation area and allow the coaches to remain with their teams and coach. And that way we could contact the parents. So they appreciated that. Allowing parents and spectators to come to our home games, I think was a plus for the season. I know I had a lot of conversations with parents and grandparents and that were allowed to come to the games, and they appreciated that. And also being able to see their kids being streamed on away games. I think that'll be an element that will probably stick around even after the pandemic. I think you'll find that there are going to be more streaming opportunities for people, which again, I think we said all along that as many pitfalls and challenges that we've had, there'll be a lot of positives that will come from this as well. Last couple, I think the coaches and players appreciated creative ways to try to figure out how to keep some things that we've done in the past, rather than just being told no, and no, we can't. I think they really did a nice job. And I think that's true with Cammie and her crew with the fall musical. I think the kids and the coaches have done a really nice job of trying to be creative and think of ways of how we can do things safely rather than just being told you can't do that. Water bottle requirement was something we want to keep. I think that is a great thing that ensures that all the kids are hydrated every practice. And I think that's a plus. Having the senior games at the first part of the season was a positive thing for the kids. I think it set a good tone. I think that set their minds at ease that was taken care of. And then support with the families, the parents, the grandparents was tremendous. And I think the coaches did a great job with sanitizing throughout especially early on, once the equipment got going. I think they did a really nice job with keeping that equipment sanitized. It was a lot of work, a lot of extra time that has to go into that. I think our phys ed teachers can speak to that on a daily basis, but those were some of our challenges and positives. I think overall, I think it was but we made it through from start to finish. And other than the cross country team getting, that taken away at such a late time, but I think it was the right decision based on everything that's happened over here in the last week or so across the state. And I just feel fortunate that we were able to get through everything without an outbreak. We weren't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I think moving forward to the winter, I think the challenges are going to be greater because we're going to be inside. I think the masks are going to have to be stressed big time. I think we saw that last night with a clip from WABI. I think our coaches have got to they've just got to be diligent. They've got to be firm. They've got to set the tone. They've got to model it. They've got to have high expectations of the kids, and that starts with me. And I think obviously the scheduling is going to be a big issue with us, because I think if these numbers keep climbing, we're going to have to deal with a lot of yellows and a lot of adjustments to schedules, because from week to week, it's going to be a different opponent that you're going to have to cancel a game with and try to figure out ways to make up. So that's what I have. I'll field any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mike and Steve. Yeah, it's like, my sense is it's like everywhere we're learning as we go, and things are not perfect on day one, but I feel like you said, the coaches and the students did a great job overall. And, I got to go to a couple of my son's soccer games, and it's great that I was able to go, and I did observe our teams, following all the rules. And, I think it's probably fair to say that, just as with education, we were clearing the bar a little higher than some of the other schools. We were clearly on top of things, and students were following the rules. So I appreciate all of that. Anything else from anybody else?
No, just another congratulations. I think it was a tremendous success. It's home with high school age kids. There's no question in my mind how important this season was, Mike, and the fact that we're able to have it and have it successfully is just such a great success story. No question in my mind. These kids would be in a very different place mentally if the season didn't happen. So just want to say thanks again to Mike and Reg, and to Steve and Richard as well, and everyone involved that made this such a success. And Mike, especially, I guess, or at the high school, especially with the senior, I really do appreciate that we made the extra effort to allow parents to view the home games. Plenty in the region didn't do that, and it meant a lot for us as parents. I can assure you, knowing that it's the last time our kids are going to be on that field. So all around, great job by all, and much appreciated.
I'll just echo everything that that Leo said, and really emphasize too how great a job our kids did in the practices and the games that I was able to witness. They really did a good job following the rules and the protocols, and we would not have been able to get through the season had they not been very diligent. So I think there's a lot of question of how good a job they'd be able to do following those rules. From everything I saw, they did a great job. So thanks to everyone involved in that.
Okay, thanks, Steve and Mike. You want to introduce the next two, or you want? I think Lisa's up next.
Yeah, no, we can just roll right through.
Go ahead, Lisa.
So I'm happy to report that our own Sandra Seavey has been asked to represent the Penquist region for the state of Maine's English Learner Advisory Council. She's pretty excited about it. I think it'll be a great experience for her. One thing I wanted to let folks know is we have, with our COVID funds, we have gotten Learning Ally, which is a subscription to web-based audiobooks for our students. And it's less expensive than something like Audible. It is specifically for schools and students with any kind of reading deficit or physical or visual deficit. It's for students in regular ed, special ed, 504 plans. As long as a teacher recommends them that they would benefit from this, then pretty much they're able to uh, be enrolled and take advantage of it. Right now, last time I checked, we had 116 students enrolled. We did have 3 trainings on it with all schools in the last month. It's still just getting off the ground, but I'm pretty excited. We've got 33 kids reading with frequency. We've already got close to 5,000 pages having been read by students. And, you know, I'm thrilled to see some of the regular ed teachers putting books on students' bookshelves, whether it be for geography or history or English. It's just been, it kind of levels the playing field and allows students to read and with fluency and use the tools in the app that just make things a little bit easier for them. And then the next one is foundations. Here we use some local entitlement money, and we bought 2 early levels of reading programs and some professional development for staff. The reading programs are based on the Wilson reading program. We've been using the Wilson reading program with students for years, but it's focused mostly on older learners. So the foundations program is that program geared in a fun, more visual way towards our younger learners. So I'm pretty excited that some of our teachers are already incorporating that with their students. Next, I've been meeting with staff in each school. We've been having separate staff meetings just to address concerns, caseload challenges, you know, with hybrid learning and what they're dealing with this year. When I look at what our counts are, total, I'm not going to go through the whole chart, but for OHS, we've got 89 students with IEPs and 63 with 504 plans. For OMS, we have 35 or we have 45, I'm sorry, and 19 with 504 plans. And for ASA, we've got 55 students and 19 with 504 plans. So I'm looking at the shifts from, you know, the 5th graders moving on to OMS, the 8th graders moving on to the high school, the seniors graduating, what that's going to look like for caseload size. One of the things that I'd like to do in consideration of maybe next year is create a position, and it wouldn't be additional staff, but it would be using the staff that we currently have, but just a little differently, where one would be a 504 coordinator. They would handle all the 504 meetings, so we wouldn't be pulling multiple staff away from serving their students. That person would be allowed to follow up with teachers and how those students are performing in the classroom, I think a little bit more efficiently, because they wouldn't have a direct caseload that they would be working with. But I also think that they could provide some relief for some of the special ed staff by performing all the observations for evaluations. We probably have 80 observations that need to be administered, and then they need to be written up and submitted annually. So, and teachers are randomly assigned those. But if we have one person doing that, then we're not pulling our teachers away again from teaching to handle that clerical work. And I think that person could also pick up a small caseload of students, possibly high school, maybe middle school, where consultation services are the only thing that are needed. It would be very similar to a 504 plan, just a little bit more involvement, perhaps with the teachers. There would be room for that. I'm also thinking there might be room to do some achievement testing, where right now, you know, we're paying our psychologist to do the achievement testing. We have one psychologist who doesn't do it, so we have to pay a different psychologist to do part of the evaluation, and it complicates things for us. So I'm thinking if we can get one of our master teachers to administer some of the achievement testing, that's going to help us all the way around. We just submitted the local entitlement end of year report and for approval, and we had $59,005 to carry over. So I'm sure we'll find a way to use that money. But I will answer any questions anybody has.
Any board members have questions? Great. Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
Meredith Diamond's up next.
So my report this month is really an effort to capture the incredible degree to which teachers across the district continue to go above and beyond in these circumstances to meet the needs of students. I am continually impressed by their commitment and follow through, and so much of the good work that's happening in the district right now is hinging on teachers' willingness to go above and beyond. As you all know, we have a significant amount of spending that is happening through the CRF2 funding stream, and navigating that from a tech perspective means identifying the places in the district where an investment in technology can support the work that is already being done and solve some of the problems that have emerged because of our unique learning circumstance. And in order for that to manifest in the purchasing that can help solve those problems and support that instruction, we have a tech committee that it continues to meet weekly to communicate what those needs are. We have tech leads serving in the buildings who are putting names to problems and identifying where the how the investment needs to be channeled. And then we have Jason and Melissa in the tech department facilitating the actual purchase and delivery of all of those devices. And this has been a huge lift. This is ongoing, but our hope is truly that by the time these devices are in teachers' hands, they will remove some of the obstacles to our instructional circumstance now, as well as problems that may emerge as a result of a change to instructional circumstance in the coming weeks and months. Specifically, we are going to be installing dozens of interactive displays in classrooms across the district that will better connect students who are in the room with students who are at home, while connecting both of those groups of students to the instruction that is happening. We are innovating our use of different camera and sound systems to solve some of those problems in the district. In addition to the provision of a secondary device for every teacher so that they can both be managing students who are not in the classroom on one device while navigating learning on another. I think the most recent count were upwards of 1,500 devices in the district. And each one of those is something that is managed by our tech department. So I think that, you know, they deserve recognition for the hard work that is making that possible. Another area of really impressive investment by teachers in the district is connected to our commitment to anti-racism and equity. The Anti-Racism and Equity in Education team facilitated a fantastic workshop for teachers during our Professional Development Day on October 9th. And every time I communicate an opportunity for additional professional development offered somewhere else, inevitably I have folks say, yes, please sign me up for that. Currently that includes a workshop on equity audits that's being offered by the Maine Curriculum Leaders Association. The Maine Education Association is offering an ongoing series called Leaders in Just Schools. Shauna Goodall is a participant in those sessions. And this is fueling the conversation in the district around our relationship to anti-racism and equity. The high school social studies department is pivoting to a discussion about curriculum and what this this ongoing conversation from a wide view looks like specifically when we're talking about, okay, well, what are our kids learning in schools, learning in our classes, and is that an accurate representation of our commitment to the elevation of all voices and perspectives in our instruction? Additionally, our district-wide study of Stamped continues. I'm going to give a shout out to Aaron and Brian for attending those. Thank you for joining us. We've had some really fantastic conversations, both about the significance of the consideration of perspectives that aren't necessarily always central to traditional social studies curriculum, and what it means for us that we are now both exposed to these perspectives. We understand their significance in our nation's history. And now the question before us is, how does that translate into what is happening in our classrooms and with our students? And lastly, I'd like to highlight our district-wide book study of the Distance Learning Playbook. So this is another optional opportunity for teachers that is intended to support the learning that's happening now in these pandemic circumstances. And I'm really proud to report that we have over 50 teachers in the district participating in this ongoing study. They're reading the chapters, they're attending the discussions, they're comparing what this work looks like for them with what it's looking like for colleagues, and identifying promising avenues for best practice. I'd also like to recognize Deb Bishop for pointing out to me that the publishers of the Distance Learning Playbook have an assessment-specific book that has been released recently, and our ongoing use of CRF2 is going to include an opportunity for teachers to have access to that text as well, with a supported book study that's offered by those of us in the district. And we're also exploring options for parents as well, because as it turns out, there is a distance learning playbook for parents too. So all of those are opportunities, both that are being made possible by CRF2, but that seem promising because of the incredible willingness of folks in the district to do whatever it takes to serve our students as best we can.
Thank you, Meredith. Any questions? No, great. Next up, we have superintendent report.
Great. Thanks to all of you for your reports tonight. Maybe a nice segue is I wanted to mention a little more about CRF. Meredith referenced it as she discussed some of the initiatives that we have underway. But I had to today submit a report that communicated to the Department of Education what we plan to spend of our CRF money, because they're trying to assess that and figure out if there are some surplus funds in the state, how they can be utilized. So overall, we have received $1.5 million in CRF funds over 4 different projects. That this does not include the CARES money. The CARES money is a separate kind of, it's related, but it's separate. So the CARES money is under a different timeline, and it's still active in our district, but we're actually kind of holding that to pick up some things after CRF2 and CRF1 run out. So the 4 buckets of CRF money are called CRF1, which was the initial $634,000 and some change. And then CRF2 came in October-ish, and that was $665,000 and some change. And then we also applied for an adult ed opportunity to get CRF funds. That was a much smaller amount, but resulted in $8,800 coming to our adult ed program. And then the CRF day programming, childcare, it's called day programming funding stream, which for which we received $198,000 and some change. So across all 4 of those, it's been a significant amount of support that we've received, and I am just appreciative that our state prioritized education to receive these funds. Not every state prioritized in that way. So I'm very grateful. And I know we all are that we received this kind of support, because as Meredith pointed out, it's helping us solve some of the problems that this unique kind of instructional delivery kind of has presented. So I'd say the challenge of it, though, is the timeline for the expenditures, because it's a lot of money to spend on a very short time frame with some not insignificant strings to how it has to be expended. So we worked really hard to kind of track what we had spent on CRF1. We're down to about, I think, $10,000 left in CRF1, but we started CRF2 kind of simultaneous to that. And we have plans to spend. I am telling the state they can have back $66,000 of it, because when all is said and done, I just, I want to spend what we need, but under the guidelines of this project, that's what we feel like we need to tell them. If you can spend that, you spend that, because we can't do anything more under these guidelines. I mean, there's no shortage of ideas of, wouldn't this be nice? And wouldn't this be nice? And wouldn't this be nice? But in terms of what we can justify under the kind of purpose of these funds and the capacity to obtain those items and have them in service by December 30 were kind of the guiding principles around that. And so there's a lot of purchasing that's yet to be done, and a lot of kind of background work that's happening to process all of the kind of red tape that has to be done with these to submit, because you spend and then you file for your reimbursement and you get that back. So it feels a little kind of like we are out on a limb, so to speak, with this money. But so far we've gotten back everything they've sent that we've sent in. But we're just, a portion of the way in on the filing for reimbursement, because of the way it works. We've gotten, I think, 2 payments. If Lynn's on the call, she might correct me. We might have just received 1 payment, but she's working on her 3rd reimbursement submission right now. So, it's been great. And it's been super helpful, and it's bringing a lot of great resources into our district to help us now and into the future, as long as these, live their useful life. There are some things that we got into and the rules changed. So we're on the hook for some things like licenses, where they changed the rules around licenses and how those work. When we, purchased a certain amount at the beginning in response to needs, and then they came back and said, well, sorry, you can only charge those out through December. Anything past December that you bought for a license for this year, you have to pay for that, not CRF. So there are things like that they did with this that are just, frustrating, but I say that, but also I'm really grateful for the money. So, I just wanted to kind of give you that update, so you had a picture of that and kind of knew where we were with the CRF stream. I see Lynn is on. Have we gotten 1 or 2?
We've gotten 1 regular CRF and 1 day program back.
You're muted,
We
Lynn.
What was
I can
that?
hear.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
We've submitted our 2nd CRF1 invoice, and we're working on the 3rd, hopefully to be submitted by the end of this week. We've also submitted our first CRF2 invoice, waiting for approval on that one. And we've also submitted our first CRF adult ed invoice, waiting on that one as well. The DOE says they're about 3 weeks behind in reviewing the invoices. So last week they were working on October 5th submissions. And so our 2nd one was put in around October 20th. So we still have a couple weeks before we'll hear about that one.
So, it's been, Meredith Diamond mentioned, the technology purchases under CRF have been huge. Facility purchases like with health and safety, PPE, some facility upgrades have been another big part of our CRF expenditures under CRF 1 and 2. And then some staffing. Those are probably the three biggest kind of categories of what we spent these funds on. Any other questions on that?
I just had one question, Meredith. Do you think, so all these districts will have to return money to the state that they don't spend? Has there been any indication that the state might then take that money and reallocate it and say, okay, now you can spend this money through the end of the academic year, or not?
No, they haven't said that unless there's some change in the federal guidelines from the Department of Treasury. These came from the Department of Treasury, not the Department of Ed. So they're not working on a school year cycle. I think they're working on a calendar year cycle. They've requested, a waiver for that deadline. It has not come through. I put on my report I had to submit today when I, told them that I had 66,000 uncommitted, that would change if they extended the deadline beyond December 30. I could absolutely spend that. So I told them that. I know they know that's true. Everyone's saying the same thing. So
It was a big question at the MSMA meeting with the commissioner. And they were like, yeah, we know, but our hands are bound by the federal government. So they're trying, but unless the federal government's going to get its act together, which seems like a harder proposition, we're stuck. I would just add, Lynn, thank you for all of the work you're doing. As if adding 2 more building accounts on top of your regular work was not enough. Now you've got CRF. So I know, glad to see you still have all your hair, because I know it's really been a lot of work for you. Thank you.
So turning now to the other topic, 2 other topics I wanted to mention. Brian just mentioned the MSMA conference. He and I both attended. I attended the Superintendent's Association meeting on Wednesday, a couple weeks ago. And then Brian and I both attended the MSMA conference, and they were both really, really well done. It was all virtual, but some good, topics on a variety of issues. And, I think one of the things in Meredith's report that she didn't highlight tonight was, but it was in the written report, was about a change in the state assessment program for Maine. There will be more coming out on this, but they've published just a priority notice, I think came out in the last week, that mentioned they had canceled their contract with Cognia, which was the vendor who provided the grade 3 through 8 reading and math and the grade 11 SAT for reading and math. And so they are taking this opportunity to restructure their assessment system and try to do that under what meets the federal guidelines. And what they're saying is they're shifting to something that looks more like interim formative measures. And they're in negotiations right now with a vendor to provide that. And we hope to know more soon. But I think it would align with comments I've heard at this board level as we've talked about data and what we as a district find more useful and meaningful in terms of looking at student data compared to the annual state test that you get data 4 or 5 months after it was administered in the next school year. So this is I think a really out of the box, bold move for our state to make. And so I'm really excited about the potential that it holds to provide kind of a more aligned state assessment system with what a lot of districts are already doing. So more to come on that as we learn more, but the commissioner spoke about that at the conference and gave us just a little more insight than the priority notice indicated. So more to come as they get further with their contract negotiations. Finally, I wanted to just, I hate to bring up FY22 budget, but I was in a meeting recently with the commissioner. And one of the things that I just wanted to plant a seed about as we're thinking forward and thinking about next year is she indicated that at the state level, they were charged with reducing their biennial budgets by 10%. And they were feeling like FY22 will be the worst year. FY23 will be more of a recovery phase year. So she was telling us to, just be prepared and know that FY21, they expect to not have to do curtailments this year, is what she was telling us, but that FY22 looks to be like a challenging year. I think we'll certainly know more over the next few months, but as we're looking at our budget right now, I think Lynn sent you the October financial recently. Our spending right now is going, well. There are some things we're not spending as much on as we typically do. And then there are other things that, I know we will overspend it when it comes to the end of the year. Some of this money we have now is helping to offset the fall expenditures, like on all the permanent subs we have who are jumping in to handle some of these absences we're having related to the virus. Or, someone who's symptomatic who has to stay home. So we're going to see some of those expenditures hit our budget after December 30. But I think overall, the way things stand right now, our budget this year will be a positive one. So it should poise us to move into next year with, in good financial standing. So I'm hopeful, but it's hard to know how the state budget's going to end up and what that will mean for our funding. We also are up slightly with enrollment, so that's good news for us as well. I think there are a lot of districts. The reason this came up really is because most districts are not in that case. Most districts have declining enrollment this year. So that also is positive for us, kind of when you put it in the context of what everyone else is facing. So I wanted to provide that update for you as well.
Was there discussion, because I know there already has been, about sort of enrollment stabilization measures being asked for, I think, by a lot of districts, not us, presumably. Was there discussion of that and any leanings towards, I think they talked about using like last year's numbers or something like that. Did they hint at that at all?
They haven't said yet exactly. They're saying that they might do some kind of combination or, but they haven't said what yet. Lynn and I were just talking about this week, speculating on what they might do. But they've indicated that they may collect more information, another kind of mini count at some point. So they're still looking at options. They haven't shared with us what their plan is yet. But I think they're looking at doing something beyond the same old way they always do it, is what they've told us. They're looking at some creative possibilities. So maybe a hold harmless kind of provision.
Just from a selfish perspective, we would probably make out pretty well if they just did the standard.
Right. But we're certainly in the minority. Right. But I think I heard her say, we certainly wouldn't want to penalize districts who are seeing an increase this year. So she said that to us in one of our PNQUIS meetings.
Another thing I heard her say was that they may have multiple checkpoints in the year. They used to have 2, April and October, and now they're down to October. But there's a lot of speculation that a lot of these kids that are out of the system because they're homeschooling may come back, or more kids. So anyway, there was talk about having multiple checkpoints through the semester or through the year as well. I don't know if that's going to help or hurt us. I agree. The basic thing is we should make sure we get paid for the students we have coming to school. I'm pretty optimistic, but they definitely didn't have anything to commit. Anything else, Meredith?
No, those were the items I had to report tonight.
Any questions on the superintendent's report?
Myself. What would what does that mean? To go back to the testing, what does that mean for the juniors in the SAT?
We asked that question, and I think that's still being considered. I think that they are looking at moving away from that. They're feeling, or one thing that they said about that is the SAT was being used for accountability in a way it was really never designed to be used. And so they're looking at trying to find a way to have an assessment accountability measure that maybe is more closely aligned with that purpose. Some of us, said when she asked, are there those who you think your community values that? And some of us said, yeah, I think there are some of our community members who value that. So, there may be possibility, she's listening. I don't know where they're going with that. I get the feeling that the state is definitely considering moving away from that. She said she had a meeting later this week, the commissioner, this was last week, with president of the university to kind of hear a little bit about how they're using SAT, because I think they're operating under the kind of information that they have gleaned that many places are moving away, colleges, from using SAT, but trying to get a sense for, is that a temporal kind of shift or a more permanent one? So that's all I heard on that element. I don't know if Meredith, have you heard anything else about that at MCLA?
The discussion at MCLA echoes that, but is also forward thinking in that at last week's meeting, the call from folks in the meeting was to form a work group to bring together curriculum leaders across the state in identifying what our true goals are for our high school assessments, and then charting a path to manifesting an assessment that would help us achieve those goals. Because as Meredith pointed out, the SAT, is institutional and has value in that way. And yet, we are using it to evaluate students for whom it really is not an apt assessment. And so I think that the goal for curriculum leaders is to have an assessment that is true to the objective of evaluating all Maine students during their high school years in a way that produces data that can help us serve them better. And the SAT, the consensus is not that.
Any other questions? Go ahead and move on quickly to the MISBA delegate. First off, Leo, you were very smart. Where you owe me, you can take that however you want, but it turned into a 5.5-hour meeting, ran till 8:30 on Friday night. It was just a comedy of, I'm sure you've all seen these Zoom parodies of people on Zoom. Everybody's, Joe, you're muted, Sally, you're muted, and people who couldn't figure out how to vote. And the process they'd set up for voting was incredibly slow. So every time we voted on something that wasn't the main motion, every amendment, we had to wait 5 minutes for them to create the survey to vote with. And anyway, it was kind of it was kind of amusing if you had the right attitude. And eventually a lot of people peeled off for dinner and it kind of settled down. But let's see. So we had 4. Honestly, the overall reaction was very similar to this board of, yeah, these are all good things, but they don't really say anything. But in the end, the remote learning, a couple of us were concerned about how open-ended that was and read it like we did, which is, this is talking about remote learning into the distant future. Somebody made a motion to pull it out of the state funding formula, which is part of the language. So I supported that, but that didn't pass. And in the end, the thing passed by a large majority. Most people read this as just, please help us with COVID remote learning, give us money, give us tools. I don't think that's what the resolution said, but that's what people read it as and voted for. I voted against in the end when the funding amendment didn't pass, but the majority voted, 2/3 majority voted for. Family support, same thing. Everybody said it's kind of philosophical. The resolution committee said it was meant to be philosophical. People worried about an unfunded mandate. It passed 50-7. The equity in education had a lot of discussion. There was an amendment to add economic status and age to the categories of equity, which passed. There was an amendment to ask the DOE to provide support, maybe technical support as much as funding, which passed. There is an amendment to make it much more concrete and talk about curriculum and training, and I forget the whole list had 4 or 5 specific actions that did not pass. The overall, even though everybody was pretty sympathetic to that idea of making it more concrete, I think people just felt like it didn't belong in the resolution. So overall, as amended, that passed. The remote board was almost unanimous. It passed 49-3 people in favor of it. Some people spoke to the flexibility of board members participating when out of town. Some people, a lot of people, probably more people spoke to the great benefits of having community participation. And so if the state legislature listens to MESBA, that some sort of change enabling remote meeting participation will happen in the future. There's also, this caught me by surprise. I don't know if I missed it, but there was a ton of housekeeping measures. There was like a series of 50. These resolutions all become a permanent document. So there's like a 30-page document of all resolutions currently standing. There was housekeeping that cleaned up. Some of it was punctuation. Some of it was, there was a position of concern around charter schools, which people felt like now that we have 10 charter schools and it's capped at 10, that position could go. So anyway, there was a bunch of housekeeping stuff, but nothing of great excitement. Probably the charter school thing was the greatest excitement on that whole topic. So that's what happened. We passed, basically we passed all 4 resolutions with a few changes. Don't know what will happen from there. Any questions on that?
Did they record the whole thing? The whole marathon?
I don't remember if they were recording or not. You would kind of hope they did, but I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. Yeah, I mean, the beginning was actually pretty funny if you didn't have to sit there the whole time, but yeah. Oh, and the other thing was people kept moving the question, which was supposed to be a way to hurry things up, but moving the question meant we had to spend 5 minutes creating a ballot for people to vote on moving the question. And so anyway, we must have spent at least an hour moving the question to hurry up debate, which didn't work very well. People knew just too much parliamentary procedure to be dangerous, but not enough to know how to get where they wanted to go. All right, school reopening plans next up.
In the board packet, I provided some data, really 2 data sets. One that kind of follows along some of the CDC charts we've been looking at the past few meetings, that shows the county by county snapshot kind of at points in time. So that data is something that I provided for you to review. And then Brian has started compiling some charts based on really the same source of data, but just looking at them and, kind of from different angles. And all of this kind of leads me to kind of say in summary that we obviously have, increased cases happening in our state and happening around us. When the case count, the 7-day average for cases in the month of November has gone up 60 in that average. So it was 99.9 on November 2nd, and today it was 165.3. So, and it's just been the steady increase. And that certainly bears out when you read the news every day. So, in addition to the news, every day I mention Karen and I talk a lot, it's just the virus is really closing in on this area in terms of the prevalence, right? So, things are happening at UMaine, things are happening in places that are right around us, childcare facilities, neighboring schools who are dealing with this. The most recent one, I know it was in the news, Bangor High student. That student also attended UTC. So it just got, it was one of those kind of complicated ones that happened over the weekend. And so I feel like, it could happen to us at any point. It honestly could happen tonight. And that's just, the reality of it. And I feel like more and more we're getting calls from people to say, look, this has happened in our, circle of people that we're around. So, we have a lot of people in our district. I say a lot. We have a growing number who are having to quarantine because of close contact. And so I feel like all the data is pointing to the fact that when I look at where we were a month ago when we started talking about what is our green plan, and we've been green, our case counts look good, we are at a different point, in my opinion, sitting here tonight. And so as we think about what to do as a result, my thinking is that we go into kind of a watch and wait phase where we stay where we are unless conditions change dramatically, that we have to do something around, an immediate need that happens, but that we hold on kind of our next steps for adding students. Our next step was November 30th was the next kind of benchmark that something was going to be rolled forward in our green plan. So that would be on hold for now. And we would watch the data and see what happens over the next few weeks to month. I think two things that one thing that we want to do in that time though, when we last talked about our plan on October 20th, we really needed to work more on 4th and 5th grade and to figure out, mainly because of how we had structured remote learning and how the class loads were working and what the room capacities were. And so one of the things that Kristen and team are going to do over the next few weeks, is to work on a plan to do some classroom reconfiguration of students so that 4th grade and 5th grade will be poised for returning to in-person instruction whenever that can happen. Right now, if 4th grade returned to in-person instruction, we would have 2 classes with like 19 and 20 students, and then we have our remote teacher, and we just don't have a space that works for that. So in 4th grade in particular, would need to, what the plan that's been worked out is that the remote teacher will take on some in-person students and do that kind of in a hybrid model with the full remote students. So that whenever we, are ready to come back full in person in 4th grade, those classrooms will have the enrollment sizes that work for that. The 4th grade teachers felt, I think, that it was important to go ahead and make these shifts now, because the longer we wait, the harder it is for students and teachers to make that adjustment. So even though we're not recommending that we move forward with a full in-person return at this point, to go ahead and make those shifts so we're poised and ready to do so whenever conditions permit. 5th grade would use a very similar model, only their class configurations work for doing that. We have 2 classes that are, I didn't write down the numbers, less than, I think 15 or less, right, Kristen? And then one that has 8, and then the teacher does full remote for the other part of their day. So they would do the similar kind of have live in-person students and full remote students. We'd have one classroom in 4th grade that works that way and one classroom in 5th grade that works that way. So that allows us to kind of be poised for that. So that would happen in 4th grade over the next few weeks to be ready to make that change probably when we return after Thanksgiving. And other than that, my recommendation is that we continue to just assess students who are at risk in any way with attendance, grades, to consider whether they would benefit from having more in-person attendance. If you look at the enrollment chart, you can see if you compare the chart that looks like this, you compare the October count, particularly at the high school, in 9 through 11, because 12th has had, we brought them back full in person. But for 9th through 11th, you can see kind of the increase in numbers there of students who have shifted from hybrid to full in person based on kind of that criteria I mentioned. So we've been working on that, and we've paused that for a bit as we brought this larger group back at the beginning of 1st quarter. And we'll kind of have been working on with staff on collecting names, and we'll renew that kind of work beginning next week after we kind of get through tonight and kind of have a clear direction forward and have this first couple weeks of this new phase at the high school have settled. That's gone, as well as I think we could have imagined, both at the middle school, ASA, and the high school. I think that at all 3 levels, staff worked really diligently to prepare for that, and are all reinforcing kind of the rules of the road at the middle and high school as we have to change classes and such. But it's really gone smoothly. I really haven't heard just one bit of concern that the high school was addressing around some of the student return, and they've been working on kind of just establishing kind of how we have to conduct school here. I think it's just hard for seniors to come back and be really happy to be in this space together their senior year and have to distance and follow those kinds of rules. So that's the challenge that I'm referencing. So I think that's settled out though, as they've kind of gotten used to this new phase that we're in. And while I would love to be able to move forward, it just doesn't feel right to me right now. And so, as I've said all along, I think I want to have as many students in person as I feel like conditions allow. And it just doesn't feel like conditions are at a place where we should be bringing more students into the building on a given day. So that's the kind of update and recommendation based on all of this. I know there's a lot of data there if you want to discuss any of it. Principals can also add in on any of the details that I may have referenced, but you might have deeper questions.
Can you just help me understand a little bit more about these shifts you're talking about that have to take place? And I maybe I misunderstood. I thought you said that if 4th came back, that there would be 19 and 20 in classrooms. I guess that's as is, that's pre whatever the shift is that you're talking about doing.
Right.
So can you help me understand what that shift is again?
So we have 2 in-person teachers at 4th grade, and 1 is teaching full remote kids. So we have 3 teachers at 4th grade, and the 2 who teach full in person, 1 has 20 students in their class, 1 has 19. So if we were to bring, right now they're in hybrid, so they have, approximately 9 or 10 students attending each day. So their room capacity is fine. But if we were to shift to 4th grade as full in person, their class enrollment would exceed their classroom capacity with distancing and kind of the layout. We've looked at it, measured it. So we're trying to get each of those rooms to 16. So we would, and Kristen would be leading this effort. And so we've done this before other times when we've had to add a teacher, for example. I think that happened at ASA, I don't know, 5 or so years ago in 3rd grade. Some of you in the room, I think, had kids in that grade at the time. And so it's, you know, it's a process to go through of figuring out how to realign classes. Does that help explain what I mean?
It does. How many, can you remind me how many students are in 4th grade?
In 4th grade, it's 49.
So there's 9 in the full remote and 20 and 19 in the other 2. Currently.
There are 11 in full remote. 39. Oh, that's because we have a couple of out of district placements. That's the difference. So
Okay.
yeah, there are 11 in full remote and 39 in person.
Okay, so 19 and 20 and 11. Okay. And 5th grade is similar like that? Is that what you said?
So 5th grade has 45 and they have 2 classes of, I think it's 13 and 15 and then 8 full remote. Or 13 and 15, help me, Kristen.
I think it's 13 and 14. I can double check though.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's all right.
And we have out of district placements in 5th grade as well.
Gotcha.
Okay, kind of just to build off of Leo's question. So how, I mean, I know you're still working this out, but how would it work that a teacher who right now is doing full remote, how are they going to have the capacity to continue to do full remote, but also some in-person stuff? I mean, I guess I'm a little confused as to how that's going to work out.
Yeah, I'll start and Kristen, you can jump in. You know, they'll run it really like a hybrid classroom. They feel like they have gotten to the point with their kiddos where they can manage both groups and that they would do some synchronous work with live in person and remote. And then other times, you know, maybe not, to have their remote learners doing some things while they're working with in person. But with the lower number, they both felt like that was something that could be managed and also would be a smoother transition as kids potentially begin to perhaps move in from remote, that they can move into a class that has some in-person elements that they've already, you know, been a part of. So we felt like, you know, that idea really came from the teachers to, you know, try to make this something that felt like the best fit for where we are in the year. We talked about lots of options. We talked about, you know, multi-age. We talked about just a lot of different models of how it could look. But this is the one that I think staff felt like was the best fit. Kristen, would you add anything to that?
No, I think that's exactly right, Meredith. We've had numerous meetings and we've had great input from everyone. So I appreciate everybody's work on this.
Would this require some students to change teachers?
In 4th grade, right? Because you have 19 and 20 in one room and we need to get down to 16-ish. 16 really is what we're going for. So that's the process that's in front of us and why we think it's important to do that now as opposed to, you know, down the road at some point.
Can I totally appreciate the abundance of caution and that's how we've operated the whole time. I totally appreciate that. When I asked, I know asked like, what are we looking at? We talked about looking at our color rating and what's going on locally, county-wise, and even more locally. I guess my question is, why make this decision right now to not do it rather than continue to wait? I mean, we're basically in a wait and see kind of mode anyway until the end of the month, right? Because nothing was going to change. You're sort of at where stuff needs to happen was in the 4th and 5th grade. So we're kind of moving forward, and I think that totally makes sense. It doesn't sound like fun, but I think it makes sense. But we are still green, and with the full understanding that we could leave here tonight and be yellow, or whenever the ratings come out. That I think we've always understood that anything can change overnight. It's funny hearing different parents talking after we made the first decisions, like, well, of course we're not going to go the other way because we're talking about adding, and I was very clear to say, no, yeah, we're planning, but it can change at the drop of a hat, and hopefully everyone understands that. And it probably will change. It instantly it's going to change, or can change. So I guess why right now? I mean, I think we have, and I don't even think we need a meeting that would need to happen in order for you to change modes, right? If we're in green, we're working. I keep hearing an echo. We're working towards all back and green. Why am I hearing an echo? So why not continue to wait and watch, and make that decision when it gets closer?
Well, I don't feel like it's too far out, actually, to think about, letting people know what our plans are, because at the high school anyway, we will be doing a survey and making plans around, which students are electing to return to full in person. That takes a little bit of time to make happen. And I just think that one of the things about our green plan is when we rolled it out at a time when we thought, this might be able to be something we can continue down this road. And I just don't think it's that kind of plan where I think we can put dates to it right now. We put dates on it as we conceived it, thinking if we can continue with this momentum, here are some marks in the sand that we would have these phases roll out. I think just having the plan provides a pathway, but I think it would right now kind of relieve a lot of anxiety that I'm feeling, and I think is going to be growing around our district saying, well, we're going to move forward on the 30th amidst the same time things are really moving up in the state. So I would rather take the dates out of that right now and say, this is our green plan. When conditions are favorable, we'll be able to move forward with it. But I don't think putting dates on it right now feels right. And so I take your point that we could change those dates at any point, but I just don't see the signs turning to the fact that November 30th is the right day. The other part of that is it's right after the Thanksgiving break. I think that's another point that people are concerned about with what might come back into the schools at that point, at a point when might be a vulnerable time because of holiday gatherings and such. And by the way, we're adding 100 and up to 130 kids that day to the district. It just doesn't feel like the right time given what's happening now. So that's why the recommendation is what it is tonight.
I mean, in my sense, it's kind of a silly or grandiose analogy, but we're a little bit like the Federal Reserve Board, where everybody wants to know what we're going to do on a particular date, and we don't actually do it until that date, but people kind of like to read the tea leaves and figure out what's happening. Whether you're a teacher planning for instruction or a parent planning for home care, I think having some advance notice of where we're headed, which again could change 180 degrees on a one day's notice. But as we all know, the time we changed everything on a single weekend last March was a tough time. So I think the more notice, and again, notice subject to complete change, but I think the more notice we can give people to just kind of plan, and also just, know that we're not sitting here with our heads in the sand and unaware of what's happening in the world around us. I just think it's a good communication. I guess for me, it comes down to communication and transparency. We're not committing to shrink. We're not committing to grow. We're not committing to stay the same, but we're giving our best intention with 2 or 3 or 4 weeks lead time. I just think that's a good idea. I'll also just say, and I'm sure we're going to disagree on this, Leo, and that's fine. It's not something we have to resolve tonight. But for me, the red, yellow, green system from the Department of Education is a pretty slow, lagging kind of thing. This thing can change. In fact, it has changed in a single week. And they're getting better. They originally were saying we're going to update it every 2 weeks, but I've noticed that they're updating it more frequently when they need to. But I would just hate to say the only way we can change, if if the collective wisdom of the board and the administration is to read the numbers differently than the red, yellow, green system, that system explicitly says local control has the right to do that. So I just want to be careful with tying our fate entirely in both directions, by the way, to that system. I just think there has to be some room for local discretion and moving faster than that system moves. That's my personal opinion.
I don't think you're not going to get any argument from me that I'm not a fan of that system. I hope at this point, as much, but my biggest beef with it is that we just don't know how it works still.
Yep.
So
we never will.
I appreciate that isn't the be all end all, and I'm not even suggesting for a minute it should be, but the other indicators, the data you provided with positivity rate, I mean, we're still well below, we're still below 2%. 5% is a threshold that WHO used and others are using. So that number is good in the state even. Our county numbers, they've increased, but again, relatively speaking, for a county of 152,000, it's still tiny. Orono's numbers have not changed, and we can say it's lagging or it's not caught up. But I mean, we can't. I don't think we make decisions by. Oh, I know. We're hearing the university report that something's happening with a department up there. I mean, those people work up there. They may not be in this community. They're probably not, because it's not showing up yet anywhere. So, I think looking at the actual data, it's still, I get, and I'm not sticking my head in the sand. I see the numbers are going up everywhere, including in this state. But the general parameters we've been using don't, for us locally, we can look at state headlines and listen to state headlines and listen to Dr. Shah every day talk about everything that's going on in the state, but that still doesn't necessarily play out here in Orono. So I don't know. I just feel like there are repercussions to every decision. We just wound the clocks back, and it's dark at 4 o'clock. This is a tough time of year for people mentally. I think continuing on our path to get kids in school 4 days a week versus 2 is going to do a lot mentally for people. And I still continue to feel that we're not giving that its due, the mental impact of decisions like this. I just don't feel like I think that's a silent thing, and it's easy to ignore. I'd shared the data from the state on drug deaths, and I think that's a relevant piece of data. It's a case where we've got an increase in the state, and that's at least the Attorney General is suggesting it's happening everywhere. It's COVID related. At these rates, we're going to be 35 additional deaths in Penobscot County by the end of the year. 35 additional deaths, and right now we're at 6 deaths from COVID. So we can't, and they're not all COVID related, but it's having a real impact, and people's mental health is a real thing, and I just feel like we need to be cognizant of that, and I do think it makes a difference for kids. I've seen it because I've got a senior, and I've seen it that she's now getting up and going 4 days a week. It's a difference maker. Kids are going to be alone. They're going to be home Wednesday through either Wednesday through Sunday or the other, depending on the cohort. The more we do to get them back with other students, I think is going to have a really positive effect mentally on them. So I hope that we can keep that in mind as we're making these decisions.
I mean, for me personally, educating students is probably that's my metric or piece on the other side of the balance more than adult mental health. Not that that's not something
Adult.
too. I just don't.
I meant student. Sorry, I'm
Student
talking
mental
about
health.
students.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things on both sides of the balance. It's hard to weigh out, and different of us are going to weigh them out differently. Positivity is at about 2.5%, but it's gone up by a factor of 4 in the last week or week and a half. So that's something that I'm watching pretty closely. There's this exponential growth that just shows up in all the data that's really hard to ignore, that makes me think we need to wait and see how that exponential growth plays out before we push forward too much. And I also just have to say, for me, I mean, I hear for you that, the current infection rates are not a big number for the county. But for me, 2,500, 2,500, which we've crossed, is getting to be a number that I'm noticing. Vermont, I saw somebody in the chat reference the Vermont website. I check them a lot too. Vermont doesn't let anybody in who comes from a county that is worse than 1 in 2,500. That's they're the best state in the country. So, take that for what it's worth. But for me, by the time you get to about 1 in 1,000, that's a line that I start to take pretty seriously. When you get to 1 in 1,000, you got good odds that you got 3, 4, or 5 kids coming to school sick on any given day. And that's so, again, different opinions, different balance of the weights, but I just need to put it out there for me that the numbers that we're starting to look at, not quite there. And I totally agree with you that we have to look locally. The national numbers are worse than state numbers. State numbers are much worse than county numbers right now. And I don't know exactly where things are the worst in Penobscot County, but it does seem like things are better in the Orono, Greater Bangor area at the moment than the rest of Penobscot County. So I think all that matters. And, I've pushed for grabbing every window we can. And thank goodness we have grabbed this window from, the end of August to whenever it is. But I'm getting to a point where I'm starting to look at these numbers and getting pretty scared. We got another week or two before I would be arguing to pull the plug and, and continuing to grow like they're going. But we're getting pretty close in my book. We're seeing exponential growth and we're not starting from that great a place. So that's my personal opinion. I'm sure you and I could have more of a conversation, but I wonder if Mark or Jake or Aaron want to weigh in too.
I guess I agree with everything, virtually everything that Leo pointed out, and I do think there's important considerations here for mental health of students in particular. I also don't think that mental health of the larger community is inconsequential. That being said, I also agree with Brian that the growth over the last 10 days to 2 weeks is pretty concerning. Maine is increasingly starting to look like other places have looked. And if you follow the trajectory out, how it played there, where we might be headed here, doesn't look all that great. I do think that we can still take some steps, and hopefully we do that to kind of stamp that out and maybe turn the tide. But given the fact that the weather's getting colder, people are going to be spending more time indoors. Public health experts have warned us repeatedly that as fall turned into winter, the situation would get worse. It certainly seems like it has. So that being said, I think I'm supportive of Meredith's recommendation for maybe hitting the pause button, and with the hope that we still want to go green when conditions warrant. And hopefully the situation will turn around and allow us to do so. But I think for right now, I'm supportive of hitting that pause button with, I guess, maybe one caveat and then one point that I just want to reiterate. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. One, I do think that we still have a bit of capacity up at OHS to add a few more students full time when you look compared to the OHS numbers compared to ASA and OMS. And yes, I recognize that older students don't necessarily behave transmission wise like the younger students, but at the same time, there doesn't necessarily, the data don't show any real difference between middle school age kids and high school age kids. So I think OHS, I think can add a few. I would certainly not say a full class, but I think there's a little bit of capacity there to add some kids at OHS. And I'm glad to hear Meredith say that starting next week, the administration there will be, gathering data from teachers, or is gathering data now to try and reach out to kids who need that. Because I think there are some high school kids who really, really, really need to be in school 4 days a week, if at all possible. So that's one. Two, and this is probably a bigger concern for me is let's say that we don't really get the green light to go forward, but we also don't get any kind of light to go backwards, and we kind of are stuck in a holding pattern. If we're stuck in a holding pattern for any period of time, then I think we really need to seriously consider, and I think we need to have a plan in place at the end of the second quarter for what we're going to do, so we can tell parents ahead of time, are these equity concerns that I've talked about. I will not be supportive of anything that allows a certain group to have a full year, full in-person experience, where there's other groups that have a full year of no opportunity to be full in person. I will go to the mat on that one. So I really hope that there's some serious consideration being put into place for how we're going to address that in the event that we get stuck here. It might end up being irrelevant. We could end up, yellow Friday morning, right? I do think the state's getting better on their color coding. They've backed off the 2 weeks. They are, in my opinion, adjusting on when they need to, although they haven't given us any greater transparency on how they do it. They at least seem to be doing, the magic behind the screen a little bit quicker. So I appreciate that. But if we stay where we are, I think we need to have a plan in place so it doesn't come as a surprise, that treats everybody as equitably and as fairly and as transparently as possible. So I'm hoping that that's, going forward. So, but for right now, I'm supportive of Meredith's recommendation.
So the only thing I would add, I probably fall more where Mark does. I realize that things around us are getting ticking up a little bit. So I'm supportive of the pause. And I think the word pause is a good word to describe what we're doing. I'm also appreciative of the fact that even though we may be pausing, we're still moving forward with planning so that when conditions allow, we're ready to undo the pause button and continue forward and ready to do that at that time when the conditions allow. So, I'm supportive of the plan that you've laid out at the beginning. Is now probably about 20 minutes ago of, just seeing what's going on around us, hitting the pause button, not taking steps backward, but not pushing steps forward, just kind of reflecting and taking a wait and see approach in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think it's really smart to pause right now, because I think we're going to be seeing a lot of changes here in the next few weeks. I know my whole department is actually our office department is closed because everybody has been exposed to COVID. They are like with a positive person in their household. So it brings it really close to home that it actually is happening right here and right now. And they're not on the positive test list, but they're going to be. So yeah, I support pausing and being really flexible thinkers and, moving either direction as soon as we can. But I think right now we've got to see what's going on.
I just had, I guess, maybe one thing to try to understand. I'm not sure what I said that made it imply that I was thinking of like my or adult mental health, because that isn't. Maybe it's just the fact that it was the drug deaths, but I do want to clarify that the youngest age was 16, so that's a student, and I think that's really important. So again, maybe I said something that I wasn't where I said. I wasn't referring to my mental health or necessarily, not that I'm discounting parental mental health either, but my focus is very much on student mental health.
Understood, and certainly important. Thank you.
So,
Anything else?
I would just say that we, have been thinking about equity, and it's not an easy kind of consideration to figure out, but it's something we agree is important to begin planning for. I mean, so much of this is right now, I think that what happens over the next 6 weeks will really impact what those plans look like. And so, we are doing some initial thinking. So just know that, that hasn't fallen on deaf ears, and, appreciate the consideration of the importance of that, because it is, there's a difference in what you can get in full in person and what you can get in a hybrid model. It's why we have school 5 days a week under normal circumstances. So I don't think, I would never say that it's the same. I think if you ever take a online course as an adult, it's certainly a transition, but for young students, it's definitely a big difference between being able to be in the classroom, and we acknowledge that and recognize that. I think everyone's been trying to make lemons of lemonade, and making some really fine lemonade in the process here. But thinking about kind of the long-term view, if we, end up kind of in deciding this is the load on the building that seems to be the capacity for a long-term kind of time frame, what does that mean for student equity is something we're talking about. Thank you all for your feedback on that.
Okay, next up we have crossing guards.
Yeah, so there have been some, I guess, inconsistencies this year with crossing guard support, particularly at the Westwood corner. I think we all are missing our dancing crossing guard who put a smile on all of our faces and was very faithful and reliable to that position. And I think, the company has been struggling to find consistent employees for that role. I've communicated with Chief Ewing numerous times about it. I don't often know until someone lets me know. Mark's pretty faithful to let me know if he sees it. Officer Lesky's called down there quite a bit. When someone notices they're not there, he jumps down there as much as possible to fill in. It's not realistic to think that, he can do that day in, day out with other things happening. And so, we've expressed that. Mark asked that we talk about it at the board meeting. I don't know if you have thoughts you wanted to share, but, I asked Chief Ewing, are there other options? And he said he didn't think there were. He would explore, but that he was leaning on the company as much as possible to try to get kind of results for the, issues we've been seeing. So, Mark, did you have something else you wanted to mention?
Well, I just wanted it to be on the agenda, one, just so that people at home know that we're aware of this and that you've been taking steps to try and get this addressed. I mean, this, for people who've been following this for a while, this isn't the first time we've had to address crossing guard issues. And, we had a very good solution, right, in place for a couple of years, but as you pointed out, it's contingent. Seems that there's one company that provides this service. Like many other places right now, they seem to be struggling to find employees, but it is a concern, right? And so I wanted to make sure people knew that we were aware of this and that things are being done. I always think it's a big concern. It's pretty high up on my list. I think it's even more so this year, especially at the Westwood location, when you see the amount of trucks that are coming out of there because of the construction project, right? And over the last week to 10 days, when you combine the construction with what was going on for the paving project right around that same area, there were days where you just really couldn't see much of anything. And the idea of, kind of a 3 or 4 foot person walking down the street without a crossing guard there to step in was making me really nervous. So I just wanted to make sure that people knew that it was on the radar and steps are being taken. But it's as we all know here, it's an easier thing to talk about and a much more difficult thing to fix. So, but that was my real primary reason for putting it on there, so people know we're aware and we're trying to take steps on that.
I know there's a statewide shortage of bus drivers too. I imagine it's drawing from a similar pool of people, and they've been raising wages and they have a statewide commission on it, and it is just a tough market. But I mean, the only other thing to add is if anybody listening knows somebody who wants a part-time job working outside mornings and afternoons, get in touch with the superintendent's office. Anything else from anybody else on the board? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to action items. First action item is co-curricular recommendations. We have a slate. I'll read it in a minute, but I'll make a motion to approve the 3 co-curricular recommendations as presented. Is there a second?
I second.
And the slate is show choir, Cami Carter, show choir music director, Terry Henry, middle school chess club, Brian Tripp. Any discussion? All right, we'll go ahead and vote. Aaron,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Leo,
Aye.
Mark,
I, and just a thanks to all 3 of those individuals, has been the case for all of our extra and co-curriculars so far, for taking the extra effort and work to allow these opportunities to go forward under these conditions. So a very supportive aye for me.
agreed. Also aye. Next up, we have policies. So this looks like a lot of policies, and the first 3, well, number 3, actually, the policy committee is gonna pull back and we need to work on it in policy committee again. But number 1 and number 2 look like big changes, so I'm actually gonna propose those as first reads. But the basic context that you need to know is we used to have a policy on non-discrimination and harassment and sexual harassment of students and harassment and sexual harassment of school employees. And these were all founded under the EEO laws, and we had a good
Hey,
process
Brian,
for.
can we pause for a second? I don't see them they're not in the file. Where are the policies? I just want to be able to look at them as you're discussing.
So they're
Link
active
to on
links
the
on the
agenda.
agenda.
Oh, okay.
If that doesn't work, I can send you a link to the policy folder.
Nope, that's okay.
It was the revised agenda, Aaron, not the one that originally went out. It was the second one.
Okay,
Right.
good. Thank you.
So the policy ACACAA, ACAB, and their regulations. The main thing is that the federal government changed the Title IX laws. And so now we kind of had this bifurcation of if it's a Title IX issue, which deals with gender, we have to deal with things one way. And if it's not a Title IX issue, we are partly required by law and partly choosing to deal with things the old way. So now these policies have basically doubled in length, and they kind of say, well, it's it's like a flow chart or choose your own adventure, although these are obviously terrible adventures where if it falls under one set of laws, you have to go to this part of the policy, and if it falls under another set of laws, you have to go to the other part of the policy. So having said that, this is most of it, this is dictated and straight out of law. Meredith did a great job pulling all these together into updates. We have read these now twice in policy committee. The policy committee is happy with where they're standing. So that's what I can give you for background. So let me go ahead and get a motion on the table for discussion. So I will make a motion that we recognize a first read, so not adopt or revise, but recognize a first read for policy AC, non-discrimination, equal opportunity, and affirmative action policy. Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion or questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote, especially since it's just a first read. Aaron,
Aye.
Jake,
Aye.
Leo,
Aye, and those links don't seem to work for me, but
okay, we can pause and I can,
You have to.
that's all right. I think after would be fine anyway. I can't speed read. Okay, I'll take the whole things.
Mark, would just carry on the vote.
Aye.
Rachel, you were trying to jump in.
I think Leo might have to be under his RSU email. If he's going under his personal email, it's not going to work.
Yeah, that trips people up all the time.
I think I'm in here now. I know. I sorry about that today. I was inadvertently on my other one. So, but then I did go back in. I thought I don't know who I'm in here now as, but I'll get it. Thank you.
You can look over at that circle in the top right. It'll tell you which. If you hover over it, it'll tell you which account you're in.
I'm
I
in as
think
my
I'm on the right one,
RSU
and
actually.
my links don't work either.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm in as RSU.
Do you want me to pause a minute and send you a folder link, Aaron?
Actually, I might have been in my main account now that I just double checked when I have like 10 of them open. Let me try
I
again.
know I have 3 and I can never tell when it arbitrarily switches me between. It's kind of a pain, but
Happened to me today as well. Just, it never happens, but it happened to me today. So
don't want to rush things. Is every board member okay with continuing? Okay.
Go ahead.
So I will make a motion to adopt policy, to recognize a first read, make a motion to recognize a first read of policy ACAA and ACAA-R, harassment and sexual harassment of students, policy and complaint procedure. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Same thing, this bifurcated based on Title IX versus other law. Any other question or discussion?
I'd just like to add on these, you see in ACAA-R, Sam Runco's name as the affirmative action officer and also the Title IX officer. She played a big part also in kind of figuring out what we needed to put into place to be compliant with the new Title IX regulations. And so, you know, she's going to be training all of us on Title IX investigations because there's just a lot of layers to this that are new and different. I think she's on tonight also, if we have any, I saw her. Yes, she's still here. So I just wanted to recognize her role in this as well.
I also just like to thank her for holding that position. It's not fun position, but it's a really important one. So grateful that Sam's doing that. Any other discussion on ACAA? Yes, and Sam, if you do want to jump in, go ahead. Okay, we'll go ahead and take a vote.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I'm right here. I had to take my son to an appointment. But thank you very much, and I look forward to working with everybody on all these policies and making it happen.
A little broken up, but I think we got most of that. Thank you, Sam. Aaron, your vote?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. We are going to skip ACAB and ACAB-R. We had some technicalities come up, so that's going to go back to policy committee. But it'll come after the next policy committee meeting, which I guess will be in December. Okay, the rest of these are dealing with changes in Maine state law. You may recall the legislature was very busy, not so much this year, but last year in their first year of their 2-year session. However, every one of these is like a 1 sentence or half sentence or 3-word change. So, but we're doing them to come into compliance with what Drummond and Woodson says we need to do in our policies. And they actually come in, well, several of them come in pairs. So I'm even going to motion them in pairs. So I'm going to make a motion to revise. So this would be final, adopt the revisions for ACAD and JICK on hazing and bullying. Is there a second?
I second.
And what these are doing is just adding gender identity to the list of things that can be a basis for harassment occurring, right? So they have race and sex and a bunch of other things, but they're just adding gender identity, which is now Maine state law. Any questions on those two? You can see the text edits if you want to, but that's what they're doing. All right, if people are good, we'll go ahead and vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. The next two will also take as a pair, JEA and JHB. So I'd make a motion to revise, again, final change, to JEA and JHB. Is there a second?
I second.
These are both attendance in school in Maine is mandatory from the time you're 7 up, and then there are exceptions once you're 17 and it's not mandatory, and if you're homeschooling and some other. But anyway, our policy deals with all of those, but the change in the law is it's not yet mandatory from age 5 and up, but if you enroll in school from age 5 and up, it is now mandatory. That's the change in the law, and these policies are just defining that it is compulsory to attend once you've enrolled in school between the ages of 5 and 7, and that our truancy process kicks in for students who are enrolled in school from age to 5 to 7. And again, it's a state law. We're just bringing the policy up to date with compliance with state law. If you're 5 or 6 and you don't enroll in school, it is not compulsory. But once you've enrolled in school, it's considered truant and our process kicks in, which probably helps to catch some kids who need to be caught. Any questions on this one? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. JLCD is one that's, in my mind, the state legislature wasting school board's times. We have to give an exemption on the administration of medications to sunscreen. We have to allow students to apply their own sunscreen. So we are now complying with the main laws if we pass this policy. So I'd make a recommendation to revise policy JLCD to let kids apply their own sunscreen.
I second.
I know you're loving this one, Leo. Okay, any discussion on this? We'll go ahead and vote. Aaron?
Aye.
And Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. The next one is really part of a pair. There's also GEBB, but we decided to let that sit with policy committee one more round, especially in case any teachers want to comment on it. But again, we're just updating to comply with state law. The core issue is we ask a question on our employment applications. Have you ever been investigated and found guilty of or terminated or have disciplinary action? I forget the exact details based on an investigation. But there was this loophole that if an investigation was started and you resigned before the investigation came to completion, this was not tracked by the state. And so this is closing that loophole, that if a teacher in a district somewhere else in the state is being investigated for a variety of inappropriate behaviors in school, and then they resign before the investigation comes to a conclusion, that district now has to report that to the state. And so the state's database will not just be people who were found guilty in an investigation, but people who are, the investigation confirmed an issue, but will be people who quit before the investigation finished. So it's closing that loophole. JCF is the part on our side where when we're hiring somebody, we will now make sure to check with the state to see if, the applicant, if we're going to hire the applicant, is in that category of having quit before an investigation completed. EBB, which will come back next time, is the other half saying that we will report to the state these loophole opt-outs, but that one's not quite ready, but the JCF is ready. And it's saying that we will always check for any candidate we hire, whether they were in this circumstance of quitting before an investigation came to completion. So I would make a motion to revise policy GCF as presented. Is there a second?
I second.
Is there any further discussion or questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Also vote aye. So we're on to the added item 8C, which is van purchase approval for CREF funds.
Yeah, so we talked about, I think in September, maybe early October, the 7-passenger van. We've purchased that and have started using it primarily for food delivery. And it's working out really well for that purpose. And we have the capacity to use it with very small groups, probably no more than 2 passengers for student transport if needed. And can do that certainly with that van, as it's only used right now at kind of the lunchtime, which is, we start that at about 10 o'clock, 9:30, 10. And so we see lots of uses for that van, but what we've discovered is it would be nice to have something a little bit larger. And we heard about from a neighboring district that they were approved after kind of finding the right van and the right, asking the question of insurance in the right way, to purchase a 9-passenger, which actually is a 10 total person van, 9 plus the driver, and have been able to get that cleared through insurance. There's some instances we have had a request this fall to use the 7-passenger van for something, but it was a little too small for what they needed to use it for. And this kind of van can really satisfy more purposes, certainly now, but also into the future. With this van, we could go up to 5 with distancing, I think, the way it's laid out. And, you know, I think it holds all kinds of uses for us moving forward, kind of in its total useful life. So this is one that we found and was approved by our insurance. And so we put this forward for your consideration for approval.
So I would make a motion to authorize approval of the van that's presented. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any questions, discussion?
So Meredith, do you think
Maybe
we would
just
keep,
to clarify, this is CREF money, which is use it or lose it. It's not the general operating budget.
right, but would we keep these both into the
Any other
future?
questions?
Oh, Aaron speaking.
Oh, I keep turning my sound down because there's an echo, and then I don't hear them when there's not here in the room. Thank you. Sorry, Aaron.
That's okay. Would we be keeping both of these into the, like, do you foresee us keeping both of these into the future? And what sort of costs would they both have for just, you know, maintaining, operating? How do they affect our future budgets?
Yeah, we've looked at, yes, we would keep them for, you know, their useful life, or, you know, as long as we find use for them. I think it's quite common for school districts to have this kind of vehicle. And we have not. We've talked about it in the past, and just, you know, tight budgets haven't prioritized this. So when we looked at that previously, I don't have the numbers in my head about the maintenance and kind of registration insurance costs, but it really is quite minimal. The largest, you know, hurdle to kind of clear with this is that initial purchase, you know, kind of that initial outset of the, you know, in this case, 38,500. And so the fact we can get it through CRF, I think makes it the right time, because that ongoing upkeep is really quite, you know, affordable, because it's just a small amount each year. I don't know if Lynn remembers any of the details that we had worked on before around annual maintenance of our vans. We were looking at that budgetarily several years back now.
I don't have it off the top of my head, but
I
it
know
was.
Lynn loves just guessing numbers too.
No.
She loves that, sorry. I mean, it will depend on use, right? How much we have to replace tires and get it serviced really will depend on the amount of use. I do anticipate, you know, these being kind of a good trial phase for us to use to kind of see if we can ultimately reduce our transportation costs and, you know, give more flexibility for some of our own vans. And so, you know, we transport small groups of students for all kinds of things. And, you know, like the cross country team was taking a few kids to this race, just like, I think they were trying to take 5 total. And this would have been a perfect use for them to be able to take this, as opposed to having to order an entire school bus for that. So in the end, the payoff for the nominal cost for upkeep and maintenance is really going to be offset by the reduced transportation costs I think we could have.
I mean, my memory is, at least in non-COVID times, we figured out that even just professional development, not having to rent cars, was going to mostly cover the cost short term. So, and that's not even including all the benefits with students and not paying here. So, I mean, there will come a point, of course, 6-10 years down the road, where we have to start doing a lot of repairs and the equation may change. But it seems to me, since it's being paid for with money that's, you know, it's going to just literally disappear if we don't spend it. It's pretty hard not to use this as a trial period, in my opinion. Any other?
I thought I do remember audience participation or public comment talking about nine passenger van and suggesting that it was a doable thing for us. I don't know. It feels a little funky getting in, it's not a fleet, but it's now 2 vehicles. We moved from 0 to 2. I like the 9 passenger or 10 passenger. I hope that I could see that there probably will be many uses popping up. Obviously, there's going to have to be some policies in place on how that all works. One that I want to kind of target is supporting sending school students for after school type events and things like that, if at all possible. And I keep going back to, I know, well, even transportation. I know a teacher in Glenburn that works in Hamden that drives a van and picks up Glenburn kids and brings them to Hamden. I think that's a good, I mean, if it's that obviously just worked out for them. And I think that's worthy of trying to find those types of opportunities where we can support supporting the sending school students. So, but I guess, yeah, and it's still, can we pay our registration tax, sales tax, I wonder, because that'll be a good little chunk on 2 new vehicles. It'd be nice if we can use those CRF funds for that, but as far as upkeep, or that will be down the road too, but overall supportive of NM1.
I think at the university, 9 of a 10-person van would count as a high occupancy vehicle where there's a required defensive driver training before driving it. So it's different than the 7-person. I mean, we can talk about that in policy, or maybe it's an administrative thing, but I do think it's worth thinking through that might have a more limited and restricted set of drivers and conditions to drive that van. They're just a lot more prone to flip over and skidding and a lot of things like that.
Yeah, this is the 10 passenger is the threshold for a van that doesn't, if you get over 10, it changes to be defined as a school bus. If the primary purpose is transporting students. So it requires all the same kind of, licensure that a school bus would. So in the federal regulations, 10 is that threshold. This has, Lynn, didn't you say the wheelbase is a wider wheelbase on this model, and it's one of the models that's recommended for that reason?
When I spoke with the safety specialist, that's not his title, I can't remember his exact title, from MSMA, which is where our insurance is from. And, they are very cautious with these kind of vehicles. And this model was one that he said that he saw as they've now made it safer. It has a lower roof than typical, so that the rollover is not as prevalent as in the older models. He also said that the vendor we were looking at was very, knew the rules, knew the safety recommendations for schools, and he was very happy to see that's who we were working with. So he was very happy with the specifications of this particular van that we were purchasing.
Well, that's great. I'm glad that an expert thinks it's a good, acceptable risk, and that it passes insurance. I still think we might want to have a policy where we have a different set of drivers for this than for the other van. It's just a big step up to drive something that big. So, but we don't have to decide that tonight. I certainly support purchasing it as long as the insurance covers it, which they do. I just think we have to think through. I wouldn't necessarily want a teacher who's never driven one of these things to just hop in the car with a key and 10 kids and head down the freeway for 5 hours. So, but I support purchasing it. Aaron, you probably seconded while I had my headphones off.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that.
One more.
As you know, the echo's kind of hard to deal with sometimes. You had a comment, Leo?
Is this 4-wheel drive or no? Rear.
Has no tires. Rear wheel drive.
Ready to vote? Okay, Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Okay, subcommittee reports, policy subcommittee. You saw we've not been as busy as it looks like, but we have been doing a few things. We've got two, as I mentioned, two of those still to clear out. Next meeting in December. And other than that, I don't think we have a big agenda in the policy subcommittee. We're kind of looking at job well done for the last 2-3 years, and we're looking to put energy into other areas. So not to say we won't have anything come up, but that's kind of our attitude this year. UTC, anything to report?
Yeah, because they happened to have the student that had COVID, and they found that through contact tracing, it was pretty widespread. They've gone fully remote.
Aaron, isn't that just in one of the programs?
I think that in the last email they sent, they said they'd had to do multiple programs, if not all of them. But maybe I just got an email from them that said that.
Yeah, that's new information to me.
Well, let me
it could be.
reread it here, and then I'll chime in at the end. Maybe I misunderstood.
I did just bump into Greg Miller downtown just before the meeting. So I was chatting with him, and he had told me it was one program.
Okay, good. I must have misunderstood the email that they sent out.
And it might even be the kids from Bangor in that one program, but I'm not positive on that. But it was one program, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, you know, a real, every district that I hear has gone through this, you know, it's a real challenge the first time. I fully expect it'll be that way for us. And, you know, they had to work with partner school districts, even more complicated with that kind of center, because not only are you dealing with your school, your staff, your students, you're dealing with, you know, all these other school districts and communication. So they did a nice job with that. I know it was challenging. We had a debrief meeting Monday morning and talked a little bit more about it. So, you know, I think they handled it really well.
Yeah, now I'm reading that they're saying that the people, it's Monday and Fridays, and everyone who's affected is doing remote, and the instructor is remote.
Right. They were able, because they've done, you know, good potting and hybrid, that it was really just contained to the one program on that particular cohort's days.
I did, just not to horn in on the UTC, but from talking with him, I did also just hear about a bunch of work they did over the summer with ventilation, and Greg is about the most resourceful guy. He's everything he does, he kind of does, he bootstraps it, but I mean, it's really well done. And they put some really good ventilation in the whole building, and that they did it themselves over the summer, which was pretty cool to hear. So
Yeah,
I think we need to
they are
get them
amazing
up
over
here.
there. The amount
they're
of work
so
that
resourceful.
they get done
Yeah.
on their own. Yeah.
Bruce?
Nothing new.
Curriculum subcommittee?
We are meeting this week on Thursday.
Okay. Facilities Building Committee. We did not hold the November meeting. We're planning to hold the one in December. The interior finish committees, one for each school, well, one for high school, one for ASA, and one for the auditorium, and the high school one has representatives from the middle school, are meeting currently to look. Again, we're not picking what the wall finishes are, we're just picking colors, but that's going forward. Meredith and I continue to meet with the architects in Bowman several times a month, and little change requests. I found a pipe, you know, in the door frame here and a pipe there, but they're starting to lay the slabs, the floors, and they're really trying to home in on getting roof overs so that they can continue to work in the winter. Anything you would add to that, Meredith?
Yeah, two things. We shared with the board this month, or in this meeting, the critical path project schedule. I thought, you know, Brian, Mark, and I have seen that through our work with Brian and I with the contractors, but Mark on the facilities committee. I thought you would find that interesting. I'm just going to share my screen so everyone can see what we're talking about. So it's, to me, quite exciting to look at this because it really kind of makes it real when these projects are going to begin to be utilized. So you can see the Asa Adams wing that's out front that has the classrooms and the new office area and the support spaces. Is projected to be done April 23rd of this next year. So that was probably, that's the one that they're the furthest along with. So that's really exciting that, our office team might be able to move into that later this school year. The kitchen and cafeteria day. So you can see actually for ASA and OMS, they will be working through all of next summer to get those spaces ready for the start of next school year. Both of those have those deadlines set in the contract. So, I mean, you can see based on what Brian just said, I think the one I'm showing you here shows, this one was from October 19th. So there's one that's slightly more updated now than this, but you can see on October 19th kind of where they are and where they are going, try to get to before winter kind of limits some of their work. One of the exciting points of progress at ASA in the last week was, you may not know, but the 2 kindergarten classrooms that are located out on that wing by the carport have been kind of cut off from the interior building access. They've had to go outside to get anywhere. So their new pathway, temporary, but new pathway was finally completed last week. So they now have interior access to the building. So that was kind of an exciting point of progress. And then you can see the OHS on the second page, kitchen cafeteria. Same, it goes through next summer. The auditorium is and the in-cap classrooms are kind of the furthest out in terms of completion. And those are the ones that they really have just gotten started on kind of later in the process. In the auditorium, you can see the expected finish date for that's January 25th of 2022. And the high school addition of 4 classrooms is expected to be ready November 26th of 21. So we should get that, kind of mid-year next school year. And then the last 2 sections are the retention pond construction that's out front here. They plan to have that ready by early August of next year. And same for the backfield, the football field and track project will be ready by August of next year. So we'll bring this to you periodically just so you can see there are slight shifts sometimes in how things are progressing. The architect's doing a good job of, working to enforce the contract and make sure that the timelines are able to be met. So, but having, some of the project begin to take shape and see that, framing happening and roofing beginning to happen is exciting. It's, definitely a challenge to conduct school, especially under current circumstances with all this going on. But, everyone has good cheer about it for the most part. And, I'm very appreciative of that. So just wanted you to see this and have a sense for the schedule that's been presented to us.
Aaron, anything on wellness committee? Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and move on. Any requests for other business? Any requests for future agenda items? We'll go ahead and have a second public comment period. Is there anybody who would like to comment?
I'll actually comment. Almost made it through a meeting without doing it.
Go ahead, please.
I heard you guys talk about the importance of communication. I think people who have kids who have only gone full time, for example, I have a 2nd grader, would love to hear from the schools kind of proactively about what happens if we're rated yellow, because we're all kind of feel like that's coming soon. I know the kids have been sorted into cohorts, but I mean, I haven't been contacted to say which one. And I think for a lot of parents to be able to start thinking about possible plans, you know, for finding childcare or whatever would just be really helpful ahead of time. I also wanted to comment on a thing that came up with UMaine COVID cases and how you don't feel like that should count in Orno. I completely disagree with that. The university is up to like 25 cases, like 15 of those have been the past couple of days. And like, I would say at least half of the kids in the school have a parent who has some ties to the university. So to not consider that as impacting our school is just really short-sighted. And I guess I can take a brief comment too on the 4th grade situation. I was just a little like, it's really interesting idea, and I can see while it's not ideal, probably the only way to fit those kids in. Again, to think hard about timing. The board talked a lot about the importance of having the kids have a bond with their teacher in person before they potentially went, you know, partial or full-time remote. And again, as we kind of see those numbers climbing and like uncertainty over what's going to happen, just a really hard transition on the kids to like change their teacher and then, you know, potentially go remote. So just to keep that in mind when you're kind of considering the timing on that. Thanks.
3 good points. Thank you. Any other public comment? Not seeing any other public comment. We'll go ahead and continue. Our next board meeting is next week. It's Tuesday, November 17th at 6 p.m. On Zoom for everybody except for the board. And Meredith and I have been talking. I guess we can act on this next week, but just to give people a heads up, given how quickly things are changing, we may, I think we were not talking about Thanksgiving week on the 24th, but if I remember correctly, but the week following that, there's not a board meeting normally scheduled. It's not till the 8th, but we may want one on the 1st. We'll just have to play it a little bit by ear, but just so you know, we might have a COVID reaction only meeting conceivably on the 24th or the 1st. Does that sound correct to you, Meredith?
Yeah, I think we should, you know, see what the next week brings, and we can talk about it next week. And we may just decide to wait and use it as an, you know, use an emergency meeting framework if needed. These 2 months are just kind of wonky because we get off schedule and then we have holidays, and we're completely off our normal schedule. And then when you throw on all the uncertainty right now, it just feels like maybe it's a long time to go in between meetings. So that's what Brian and I were talking about.
Brian and Meredith, are we anticipating we're going to stay here instead of the gym going forward, or is this just?
Yeah, I think this is better. It doesn't impact the cleaning down there, and is a better size for our small group.
Yep. And then, you know, if things get worse, we'll have to have a conversation when the board wants to go back on Zoom too, but I presume we're not there yet. Okay. Any requests for information and follow-up from the board? All right, the last thing we have is an executive session. So for those of you who don't watch, I'm committing that we're not going to take any vote except for adjourning after we come back out. So people can go ahead and drop off. And we are going to, I would make a motion to go into our executive session under 1 MRSA 4056D, labor negotiations. Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion from the board? We'll go ahead and vote. Aaron?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Leo?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Meredith, do you just need the board, or everybody else free to go, or?
Yes, just the board tonight.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.